Hey there, friends. I'm going to start with a slightly formal introduction. Who am I? And then I'm going to launch into a little bit of show and tell. There's a maker fair happening at OMSI today. OMSI is the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, and my plan currently would be to go there today. There will probably be pictures taken. Anyway, I'm rattling a jar here because inside I have this thing called an S module that I 3D printed and took pictures while doing, and then did one of my customary slideshows. What's on the screen now is from a job I had a while back, and so these are easy to find. And my point here about introductions is my name is kind of unusual. Kirby is not a super common name. There you'll get males and females, both Kirby, but first name not so often even. Last name Kirby maybe more often. And then Erner, that's an odd name. And I have a whole video on what's an Erner. I talk about the genealogy and etymology, whatever. It's Swiss and stuff like that. And then Kirby etymologically means like next to the church or by the church. So it has kind of various connotations depending on which bar I'm sitting at, right? Or who I'm talking to. I have that material to work with. You could say kind of the comedian, right? But the bottom line on that is when you combine two unusual names, the result is probably even more unusual. So when you do search on Kirby Erner, you get everything nicely arranged here. At least I do at this point in time, right? So I get my Twitter and all that. So I'm very easy to research. I'm not a needle in a haystack if you want to tune it in. It's not that elusive. Now, in my channel here on YouTube, what I do is I bounce around a lot, but I do so within a fairly confined space of topics. So even though it feels kind of like a pinball machine, like all of a sudden here we are in Nepal, because I'm getting some pictures back from Leela, who is a character in these videos somewhat, right? It's like we saw her off at the airport a few episodes back because she's going to Nepal, right? And so here's some pictures coming back from Nepal. And I believe in something called place-based education, where it's perfectly okay and fine to like include autobiographical material in your curriculum. Don't be so desperate to be, quote, objective. Give it up. You are you, and that's okay. Other people will be autobiographical in a different, they have a different story. So we're allowing for perspective. It's kind of like the new journalism, as they said, but long discussion. Another topic that's very common that I keep coming up with in this channel is something called quadrate coordinates, and here it is at Wikipedia. I often refer to it as being at Wikipedia, but I don't always scroll through the page, which I'm doing now, and there's going to be my name there somewhere, right? But also, I had a lot to do with writing this, so I was able to make the explicit link to Synergetics. But again, I'm not the only one who had a coordinate system invention and wanted it to link to Synergetics. This thing called Synergetics coordinates, Clifford Nelson's attempt to describe, etc. So Clifford and I don't think we got along too well because neither of us really wanted to study the other one's solution. He was an ADA programmer, ADA, and we never met, but we argued, and whether you can find those arguments is a good question because a lot of the listservs, I don't know. Anyway, just giving you a thumbnail there that I'm not like um, always on the same team with Clifford, but never mind, right? It's like this is part of the history. And there's my name around there, so I certainly have enough of my imprints are all over this, but I don't claim to have invented these things. I'm just a developer because what I've done is taken this idea of quadrate coordinates a long way down the road of implementation in the Python computer language. So what we've been looking at, those who've been following chronologically or sampling or jumping around, in most recent videos, the ones I've just uploaded prior to these, like yesterday was one. This is where we left off yesterday. Now I'm going to go to show and tell and show you the kind of things that I have to show and tell about. I'll show and tell about books, and I'll talk about Quakerism, okay, which is you can look it up. And one of the things the Quakers often point to are books like this, which I got from a Quaker librarian who was giving me some of the best, little titles. This is called A Testament of Devotion. So if you're just curious, you're like doing anthropology. You don't have to, when you read stuff like this, it's up to you to choose an angle, and you're just curious about that sect or whatever, what those people are like. Another thing I show is this book, Descartes' Secret Notebook. I think amazing this is pretty amazing stuff, and it's like worthy of a YouTube. It's way cool, right? So more YouTubes on that. If I can find some, I need to look. I watch a lot of YouTube as well as make them, right? And then I show off toys, which in this case is magnetic, and this is the cubes we use to fill space, like if you're doing an XYZ coordinate system. What I'm going to end with, by the way, is saying I have no beef with the XY coordinate system or XYZ and the whole nomenclature as it is. I watched 3 Blue, 1 Brown like everyone else. I used to teach high school calculus. I'm well versed in ordinary conventional mathematics. So when I talk about something like Martian math, where we say this cube of ours has edges square root of 2 and a volume of 3, and that's like, what? That's like kind of a nonsense. But you can explain it. And I've explained it in different countries, actually. We'll just say I've been to these places, and I wanted to continue with the show and tell. So quiz, can you tell me which country? This is a really cool flag, right? And the hint is crossword puzzle hint, Druk Yul, which is literally Land of the Dragon or Thunder Dragon. So that would be the name of the country. I just told you, but it has a more conventional name on world maps. Another one, people hear the name of this country or see it in writing but don't know how to pronounce it. And so they pronounce it different ways, and then they have trouble visualizing where on earth it could be. It looks like Africa, which is correct. Yes, it is. But hint, it's not really West Africa. So where is it? And I'll give you the answer. But again, you have to know your flags of the world. That's the answer about where is it. But what is that, right? So these are all places I've spent a lot of time. And so that's autobiographical. And so once you have this cube, this toy cube, we call this volume 3, right, for some reason. And then we have this rhombic dodecahedron we say is volume 6. And you have to size them correctly. And the way you do that, and this is my final act, is you take 2 of these, because 3 plus 3 is 6, and like I say, we want it to be 6. And what you do is, this is kind of Maker Faire stuff. So if you were to print stuff out like this on a 3D printer, and I was going to say I have no beef with always calling those 3D printers. I'm not going to go around with some like religious tract and make you sit on a bench and I'll explain to you, unless you really want to know why I've sometimes said 4D, right? And I have slideshows about that. And because there's a whole language called Synergetics, which is its own namespace, which was pioneered, developed, invented by this Bucky Fuller character that I talk about. And I consider it a work of literature, given who he hung out with and who he cited in his books and how he wanted to be thought of. So I pay a lot of attention to that. A philosopher, really. And a pretty good one. And actually, the only reason he's not studied more is because he took out a lot of patents, and nobody wants to compete with that in the philosophy department. They're university professors, they're not inventors. They're not like Wittgenstein, who tried to do a helicopter kind of thing. Or, you know, if you know the story, right? He was more, and then he got into nursing, Wittgenstein. Like, he was a kind of a pragmatist in the sense that he had other jobs besides a philosopher. That is a scary kind of pragmatist to be. But that's what Fuller was, a philosopher who did geodesic dome in Afghanistan and talked about doing it on YouTube. Very fun YouTube, by the way. So there's your volume 6, and I had to get a little hair out of it and stuff. But so I do this kind of thing a lot. So go back and maybe check out some of my others, and I'll talk about Codesters again sometime. But that's enough for this one. I just wanted to give the newcomers more of an overview of how I bounce around, but it's within a confine, so it ends up all making sense to some degree. Talk to you soon.